I wonder if anybody has seen the beautiful community. I can't see them. I can't see them anywhere. Hang on. Have they gone? Oh yeah, I think they're there. I think I found them. Hello, beautiful community. You're very welcome to the British countryside, English countryside, where I am for a couple of days with an upload speed of almost zero. It's a slight miracle if you are seeing this. We're going to have a chat about that meeting that Putin has had with the Z propagandists. Nobody is more infamously politically irresponsible of the world leaders on the global stage today. Putin is a kind of walking concentration of repulsive political irresponsibility, and for that reason you might not want to see his face, and this is an alternative way to catch up with a quick analysis of what transpired. This is going to be casual and jumpy. I've got Putin's the transcript of the meeting in front of me, so we'll see how we go. There is one thing I want to put outside of our remit today, and that is Putin saying that Mr. Prigozhin and the Wagner Group are now expected to sign contracts with the military of defense. Mr. Prigozhin has already responded to that by saying, no, we're going to have to watch this unravel a couple of more steps, and then we're going to make a comment. But in the big picture scheme of things, these are early signs that aren't going to have immediate consequences of the existentially dangerous for the Putin regime, dissolution of the monopoly over organized violence. General impressions. The faces of these people were so grim, and it was, in a surprising way, on top of all the other obvious ways, a kind of expression of the degeneration of the Russian state because of the gap in quality between Putin and these all kinds of figures, but they are not just unlovely and nasty, they're very minor in quality. And Putin, for all of his unbelievable degeneration, still remains an enormously delusional but a very formidable political actor. But to be sitting around with these folks suggests that we're not just going evil, but we're also going into a pattern of progressive degeneration. Now, the general picture that Putin painted: the West has betrayed. This is old stuff, so we'll be very brief with this. The West has betrayed Russia, and the West betraying Russia just means the United States betraying Russia. Europe is a kind of subsidiary of the United States here. Russia has also been unforgivably betrayed by Ukraine, and this war isn't a war, but a response to a situation that Russia didn't start. Or rather, he said, I listened to the speech itself, he said that we didn't start this war. Right? My interpretation, before we jump from point to point, despite Putin's lie, because he said that he has no problem with the Ukrainian independence, and then he told anybody in Ukraine to go for it, go for your independence. And this war that Putin is prosecuting now is only a product of Ukraine choosing a form of independence that threatens Russia. Now, it is true that Ukraine even not joining any Western alliance constitutes in Putin's mind, and he's right about it, an existential threat to the Russian state as he conceives it and to Russia's imperial project as Putin conceives it. I think what we can say here is that Putin would have indeed been happy for Ukraine to not need actual incorporation into the Russian state, as long as it could be run by a puppet from Moscow. Now, where are we? The basics that constitute my analysis of this. This is obviously a lie, and Putin's position on Ukrainian independence remains unchanged. He wants Kiev, but he knows he can't have it anytime soon. We'll come back to that. He thinks the war is part of a big struggle against the West. And through that struggle, he sees now a period of frozen war, if things go well for him in the counteroffensive, followed by a period of Russian escalation in a few years to come. And that just means that any talk of negotiations with Putin now, after the counteroffensive, are rather incompatible with an adequate reading of not just Putin's intent, right, but the direction onto which he is reformatting the Russian state over the years to come. Now, one of the aims looking at this talk was to get a bit more leverage and to, if you like, morally galvanize the Z propagandists and some of their audiences. This is difficult for Putin. This is difficult. I mean, the most significant political opposition he's going to face this year at home is going to come from what we can sometimes reasonably call the pro-victory party, right? These are folks who say Mr. Putin is giving us a war, he's giving us a failed war, we need a successful war. Let me read the whole thing Putin's saying here about demilitarization, as I was asked about it. He says, we're dealing with this gradually, methodically. What are the armed forces of Ukraine fighting with? Do they produce Leopards and the Bradleys or F-16s? They don't produce a thing. The Ukrainian defense industry will soon cease to exist. Everything they get is delivered to them. So the issue of demilitarization is raised here in very practical terms, because if everything is delivered, you won't live long like that, you won't last. So this is an articulation, we didn't need this, but to be confident in our analysis, but this is an articulation of the fact that Putin is trying to sit the West out. He's trying to wait until Western support for Ukraine exhausts itself, and when that happens, and this is quite an ambitious vision of Putin. He's not just visualizing us getting fatigued and caught up in domestic politics. He is visualizing a significant ripple of democratic disintegration across the Western world. When that happens, Ukraine will be alone. Ukraine can't go it alone. And as hard as things look for us now, we're going to be in a much easier situation on the basis of Putin's analysis, he thinks, in a few years. Counteroffensive questions, right? He said, what can I say? The enemy so far has not been successful in any sector, and they have suffered big losses. And there's about 5 or 6 sentences following on from that on the counteroffensive. And what I'd say is that is Putin consciously at least putting half a foot into the bucket that says we are trying to defend against Ukraine's counteroffensive, as opposed to they, the military of defense, the Ministry of Defense, or the Wagner Group are trying to defend against the counteroffensive, right? So he is taking tentative ownership, while keeping as many doors open as possible. He's taking tentative ownership here because knowing Putin, he could have said they have said they're going to do the job on Ukraine's counteroffensive. The Ministry of Defense have said this. The fact that he isn't saying this does indicate that he has had conversations that have persuaded him that Russia can hold Ukraine to limited successes. Mobilization. His answer here is, quote, "It depends on what we want." He goes on, "Look, our troops were outside Kiev." Then there's a gap that I'm going to skip over a few sentences. Do we need to go back there or not? He's asking rhetorically these Z propagandists. Why am I asking this rhetorical question? Clearly, you don't have an answer to it. Only I, Mr. Putin, can judge this. Right? Only I can answer that. But depending on our goals, we must decide on mobilization. But there is no need for that today. The recommended cartoonish interpretation here is that Mr. Putin understands what it would take to take Ukraine. And he believes that's not a question he can put on the table in the years to come, next few years to come, but perhaps in the medium term, perhaps within half a decade, that could be a question he could put on the table, and then that would require a big mobilization. And they were talking about the Second World War in this segment and talking about how many were mobilized at that time. He was asked about red lines. Where are our red lines? And to that Putin said, well, let's actually read the question. What about Russia's red lines? They've all been crossed by the West. When will Russia answer? And Putin said, we have already answered. We have already responded. The war itself is the answer. The attacks on Ukraine's energy system are the answer. Well, this is a man who does not want to have undue escalation today that will globalize and internationalize the conflict. He wants to wait it out and see what happens later. Final remark about Putin's sort of demeanor. This is very difficult because I think with a lot of experience of Putin watching and emotional intelligence, you can judge what kind of state he is in, but you can't be certain why he's in that state. So for instance, I observed a degree of physical disembodiment and nervousness from Putin in autumn 2022. What is that? Is that the is that Ukraine's offensives? Is that the precarious sense of his situation that led him to opt for partial quote-unquote mobilization? Or is it, and that could be playing a role, he was going through medical procedures, wasn't feeling good in his body. But whatever that was, this is a Putin who is feeling quite confident about his position. This is a Putin who's sitting there thinking, well, you don't actually understand how stable this thing is. You don't understand how stable my regime is. You don't understand the strength of my position, which will only be revealed in time. Right? So that's interesting. So we have a confident Putin who is looking into the months and even years to come with a modicum of assurance. So what we must do, as we discussed in the last video on the main channel, is understand that given that that's where Putin is at, given his intent, which now is more than the intent of an individual, right? It's the rails on which the Russian state is being reformatted, right? given his intent and all the political directionality that goes with it, to escalate against the West later in the decade, we need a longer and a stronger commitment, I believe, than simply arguing that Ukraine should put itself in the best possible position with this counteroffensive for negotiation. We need to be behind Ukraine longer and stronger and with less hesitation and confusion. Dr. Vlad, talk soon.